Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibis, welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi here at home. It feels so good to be home, y'all. I'm back in mom mode, back in granddaughter mode, and it rocks. So everybody's been asking how Grammy's doing. Well, Grammy's doing great. She is back to pretty much full speed. She is piddling, as she calls it, around the house and doing a little laundry, doing little dishes just to help out. But I hope she just stays here forever because I love her. She's 88. If you're new to the show, my Grammy is 88. And she's been staying with me for about a month since she got out of the hospital and had to go to rehab to get a little stronger. She's my ride or die. And I love having her here. So anyways, day 20, man, it's been almost a month since I started going to Walterboro, and it feels like it, but I've had an amazing experience. I've met so many cool people, listeners of the podcast, people that only know me from Law and Crime, which is kind of weird. So I always tell everybody I have a podcast, y'all. Please follow me after the Murdaugh trial. So anyways, a lot of people have asked what I think so far. I think the state finished really, really strong yesterday. I think that timeline, just that fine detail, and then the additional information they got from GM really wasn't super different from what they already knew, but it did add some context to things. I think it was a strong finish. I also think that this trial's been a lot like the Super Bowl this year, a lot of back and forth, that the state has a good moment. Then the defense comes and kind of ups the ante a little bit. Then the state has, it's just been very back and forth. I think both sides have done a good job so far. I know by default, people don't like defense attorneys, but I mean, look, Harpootlian and Jim Griffin are amazing at what they do, as is Creighton Waters and his crew. They're all very passionate, and it's been interesting to watch this play out in the courtroom. I'm super interested to kind of hear what the defense has. I know they have several really high-profile experts apparently coming in to testify, and I would expect nothing less. So I always say I look at things like I'm a juror because I have an illegal degree. True crime is a passion, not something I have formal training in. But if I'm on that jury, here's things I want answered during the defense's time to present their case. Why lie about being at the kennels? Okay, you should know the last time you saw your wife and son alive, which is just mere minutes before they were murdered. That's one thing I would want answered. Number 2, why delete the calls from your phone? It makes no sense. Is this a pattern? Did they go back and see if he did this before, or is this very specific to that night? I'm kind of wondering 2 things. When was this couple of hour-long drive with Paul and the nap? Didn't seem to fit in the timeline based on the phone data that they presented. Also, kind of the same thing with the kennel videos, the Snapchat video. It seems to me that if you rode around with him that night, you should be able to remember the outfit you were wearing and what time it was and that kind of thing. I thought, it was a really good finish for the state. They've had some great witnesses. I have to say, last night I watched Mr. Kinsey's video because I only get to see the back of everything. And then sometimes I can look at the monitors up front and see better than the side monitor because there's a lot of people there. But man, I'm going to tell you, I couldn't see any of the demonstrations with Creighton Waters on the floor because we just can't see that from the courtroom sitting. So it was interesting. And I just watched all of his testimony again on direct. And man, this dude is so knowledgeable. I mean, the state's had a lot of great witnesses. I think for me, just on a personal level, his was very educating because he gave demonstrations. He had angles. He made it to where that jury could picture the way Paul was standing after that first shot. And the way he explained things, I think the jury needed that visual representation to make it very real for them. And it did for me. You can almost picture that slow walk drooping. And so it brings that horror to life, really. And it is a horror. I 100%. I know there's a lot of people that don't feel that this is a justice thing for Paul, but I do. And my heart goes out to everybody, to the Beach family, to everybody on that boat whose lives have been changed forever. But I also have compassion because Paul was brutally murdered, and that's just kind of how I roll. So anyways, I really am interested to see the state's case. I can't tell you guys what I think right now. I'm so conflicted about some stuff, and a lot of that sides with the prosecution, some of that sides with the defense. I think it's going to be an interesting deliberation. I don't think it'll be quick. I really, really don't. I think they're going to take their time. They've been very, very observant. They have paid attention. I mean, hats off to this jury. They have really invested themselves in the facts, and it's very noticeable from all of us that are watching this and watching them, because that's what we do when we're sitting in courtrooms. Is we watch the defendant, we watch the jury, we watch the witnesses, and then you kind of can put that all together and figure out when things are clicking and when things are a little monotonous, just based on body language and things like that. So it's been an experience, and I hope to do this again. I'm hoping for the Lori Vallow Chad Daybell trial, although I won't be there the whole 10 weeks because I literally could not be away from my family that long. 5 days a week's enough, y'all. Let's dive into this, because I think this was the best way the state could have ended this. Although I would almost say interchangeably, I would have put Kinsey on right before the phone guy, because I think those two were so powerful. But anyways, so if you remember, day 19, which was Thursday, we left off where the defense was going to cross-examine Senior Special Agent Ryan Kelly, who was the lead investigator on that roadside shooting with Alec. By the way, one thing I wasn't able to do is put up the composition, and this is the composite sketch that they made by Alec's description of the fake roadside shooting suspect. Just saying, if he wants to go have coffee, Mr. Fake Suspect, call me. All right. Now, the other thing, I'm going to give a trigger warning, because I do have the photos of Alec in either the hospital or EMS, I'm not sure which one, of his head wound. So if blood makes you squeamish, fast forward or whatever. So here we go. Here are the pictures. All these photos are from the pool photography for this trial, but you can see on the left here, there is a defect in the skull, some bleeding, I mean, clearly something hit his head. But look, I'm going to tell you, if you've ever barely nicked your scalp, it will pour the blood down. I mean, my kids used to whack their heads on the corner tables until I bought those little spongy things. So Agent Kelly said he went to Savannah the day Alec was shot to talk to him. The defense asks if he ever tried to get the medical records from the roadside shooting, and asks if he knew that Alec had a skull fracture, a brain bleed, and a laceration to the skull. And it was kind of back and forth. It was almost like the Harpootlian wanted the agent to admit that Alec was shot in the head, and he really didn't want to give it up. But finally, he agrees that he was shot in the head. So again, he's asked if they ever tried to subpoena his medical records. He said they tried, but they weren't sharing any information with him. So the defense pulls out the medical records and has him read it aloud. And the witness reads out a left posterior subdural hematoma, which is a brain bleed, a bone fracture, and a scalp lacerations. And the findings said they were consistent with a bullet wound to the head. And throughout this, several times the agent says he's not a doctor. So I showed you guys the two photos. The defense points out that Alec went into detox in Atlanta, Georgia. And the agent said, "That's what you told me. I don't know where you were." There was a lot of hostility between some of the SLED agents and the defense. So it kind of played out that way, where they'd have to kind of yank it out of them, these answers that they wanted confirmed. And the SLED agents stood their ground sometimes and didn't answer the way they were kind of guided to by the defense. And sometimes they had to give it up. So it was a little bit of a push and pull at times. So the defense, after the agent says, "I don't know, that's where you said you were," the defense says, "SLED can't trace calls. And did you try to subpoena medical records from the rehab facility?" And he says they don't honor out-of-state subpoenas. And then so he's asked, "Did you ask us for consent?" And he said no consent was given. "But did you ask for consent?" No consent was asked for, and no consent was given. So the defense talks about Alec willingly confessing to his role in planning that roadside shooting, and asked the witness who called and asked the witness who called to set up that voluntary confession. And the witness says Alec voluntarily talked to them on September 4th. That was the date of the roadside shooting, by the way. He talked to him again on the 6th. It wasn't until a little bit later that Alec wanted to come clean about what really happened. So they talk about him sounding competent with the questions they were asking. He gave consistent stories in those first two interviews. And those first two interviews, they actually consider him the victim of a violent crime when they talk to him. But as we know, things kind of start getting investigated and sound weird, and it was weird. I have to say, his family seemed very, very embarrassed during all of this about the roadside shooting. The witness said, I called you and you said there's developments and that SLED needed to talk to Alec. And that was on September 13th when they called to set up this phone meeting. He said, we knew Alec wasn't telling the truth. So the defense says he admitted he stole money, he used drugs, and he lied. And the agent says yes. And the defense points out the result of that is he was charged with insurance fraud, conspiracy, and filing a false police report. So really, the defense is just really trying to pull out that Alec was cooperative and gave his confession. And so the witness says some of the best confessions I've ever gotten are from defense attorneys. And defense attorney Harpootlian says, not this defense attorney. And everybody laughs. The defense also points out that Buster was the one who drove Alec from rehab in Orlando to his mom's house to turn himself in. He was actually arrested at his mother's house. And the witness says there was an agreement for Harpootlian and Griffin to bring him in, and says nothing against Buster, but the agreement was Alec would be in your custody and then you guys would be with him when he turned himself in. So the defense says a condition of his bond was that he go to rehab in Florida until his arrest for those financial crimes, and asked if they were only investigating the roadside shooting. And the agent said that the defense actually set up parameters on that third interview, the confession interview, of what they could and could not ask him about. So the defense says Alec admitted he stole the money, and the agent said he confirmed he stole it. We knew he did. And the defense points out that as a result of him confessing and cooperating, he now faces life without parole after being indicted on over 90 financial fraud charges. And that kind of ended the cross. So on redirect, the prosecution talks about the hospital interview with Alec, and the defense objects. So they end up and send the jury out. The defense says, look, we're going to need medical staff to come testify about his competence during that interview, saying that he was heavily medicated and not competent to talk to investigators. This would have been one of those the day of the hospital that he was admitted, the day of the roadside shooting. They go back and forth and the jury is brought back in. But the witness says Alec gave the two voluntary interviews to SLED on the 4th and the 6th of September. And he seemed to be of sound mind and understood their questions and gave consistent stories in those first two interviews. He said their goal was really to meet with Alec, but they didn't know where he was in detox at. It didn't happen with them meeting in person. So he said they accommodated that phone confession on the 13th of September and said that they were told they only had a short amount of time for the phone call, and they were advised that the murders and the financial crimes could not be discussed with him on that call. So the prosecutor asked about Alec being taken into custody, and the witness says it was twice, once at his mom's in Alameda, again in Orlando. And that's when he was arrested and hasn't been out since. So on recross, the defense points out this is his second time in custody and wanted to know the dates. And so the agent said he would need the paperwork for that, but he thinks it was in October of 2021 for the second time. And the defense asked, how long has he been in jail? And so he wasn't sure, but it was October 16th of 2021, and asked what chance Alec has to manipulate witnesses or anything else in the case from behind bars. The defense asked the witness if anyone told the family they wanted to meet with Alec while he was in rehab to show him a photo of that surveillance picture of Eddie's truck going down the road before and after the shooting. And the witness says there were actually lots of things they wanted to discuss with Alec. The defense asked, did you tell Randy all you wanted to do was show Alec a picture of the truck? And the agent said, we knew who Eddie Smith was, but they wanted to see if Alec was going to continue to lie or show some clarity. The defense says, you contacted me because you wanted to see him while he was in detox. The witness says, you said he was in an out-of-state detox. So the defense goes back to the day of that roadside shooting when they interviewed Alec at the hospital and says, "We told you he wouldn't be competent to be interviewed until a doctor agreed that he was." The agent said Alec admitted to taking opioids that morning, but he was walking, he was talking, he was on the phone. They didn't see anything that would lead them to believe he was not competent to answer their questions the day of the shooting. The defense asked, "Did you ask a doctor if he was competent to talk?" The agent says no. So the defense also points out that when he was drug tested, he had in the hospital, he had barbiturates and opioids in his system that day. And the agent said, I don't have access to his medical records right now. So the defense asked, "Did you speak to one of his physicians or any of his medical personnel and ask if he was competent to speak with you in the hospital?" Agent Kelly says, "I did not." He said, "They didn't talk to me about his medical records." Harpootlian says, "Did you ask him?" And he starts to answer without a yes or no. And this becomes like yes or no. And then they had some intense moments there between the two of them. And at one point, Harpootlian was like, "Special or senior special agent Ryan Kelly," but he said it kind of in a, I don't know, it was just a forceful way. And so he asked 2 times, "Did you ask them?" He says, "We didn't ask them," but he says they wouldn't have answered anyway. So there you go. That's how that ended. So the last witness for the state was SLED agent Peter Rudofski. I hope I said that right. He came in on the case in November of 2021 to work on a complete timeline from all the cell phone data and the vehicle data they got from his car. New information, as we know, came in last Friday from GM. I totally think somebody that works at GM is watching the trial and they're like, "Dude, they're saying we don't comply with subpoenas. Get this stuff to them." But it really kind of confirmed the timeline they already had. This also included some longitude, latitude, as well as some speeds that his car got up to that day. And he had a condensed timeline, which, by the way, was like 50 pages for the activity of Maggie, Paul, and Alec on the day of the murders from 6 to 11 p.m. So how they get this mapping system is they get latitude and longitude coordinates and put it into a software that maps out the routes that he took that day. So one thing, CB Rowe, who is the groundskeeper, was pegged in the North Augusta area, and it eliminated him as a suspect. So they go back to before the murders, and this came at the end of this testimony, but I'm throwing it in the beginning just to kind of keep that timeline consistent. So actually on May 6th, this was surprising. Paul texted Alec, "I'm still in Edisto Beach because when you get here, we have to talk. Mom found several bags of pills in your computer bag." That same day, Maggie Googles white pill 30 on one side, RP, that's oxycodone. As you know, it's an opioid. And she deleted this from her history on whatever device she used. So on May 7th, the next day, Alec texts Maggie, "I'm very sorry that I do this to all of you. I love you." The defense points out to a witness on the stand that at the time the family was aware of his drug issues. And the witness says, "Yeah, but Maggie never responded to that text." May 26th, there's some more Google searches by Maggie. Green gel pill P30. It's a benzodiazepine. I think it's an anxiety drug, but if you don't Google it right, it also comes up with birth control. So I think it's the benzodiazepine that's kind of like a Xanax or something like that. So on the 3rd of June, this is 4 days before the murders, Alec texts the Palmetto State Bank CEO, Russell Lafitte, "I need to extend farm line credit, another $600,000. My dad will sign also if needed. How much turnaround will that take?" We weren't given any follow-up to that message. All right, so we're going to jump into this timeline. Y'all stick with me because it's really hard without kind of visuals, but it's not really going to matter if you're just listening, especially because I didn't feel like I typed all this out. I do much better when I type it out. And I'm going to do that next week because reading from scan notes is really making it to where I'm having to edit the podcast more and it's taking more time, and it would take less time if I just type it out and I can read it quickly. So 20 days in, I'm finally realizing, this is not, well, I only started doing it like a week and a half ago. It ain't working for me. I've got to have it cleaned up. Sometimes I had to go back today and rewatch testimony to get these dates, but we got it for you. So, timeline of that day, 12:06 p.m., Alec leaves for work. 12:24, he arrives at work. His max speed was 65 miles an hour. So now we're going to jump into that evening. 6:24, Alec leaves the firm. 6:42, he arrives at Moselle. Max speed 54 miles an hour. All right, so now that's the first part of the day. We're going to get into this full timeline with everybody's phone data included and put into just, a chronological timeline, because it's some of this stuff, it gets a little monotonous with the backlights on, the backlights off, but it fits into the prosecution's arguments of somebody might have been trying to get her phone or whatever. 6:04 p.m. This is actually before Alec even leaves the law firm to come home. Paul calls somebody named Will. It was unanswered, but this kid, this person, I say kid, somebody said something about me calling Paul a kid. Look, if somebody's old enough to be my child, I call him a kid. It's a thing. I don't know if it's this other thing or what, but everybody in my family calls anybody old enough to be their kid a kid. And I don't care if you're 30. So anyways, Will calls Paul back and they talk for 2 minutes and 32 seconds. 4 minutes later, 6:08, Paul makes an outgoing call to Alec. It's answered, but it's only 1 second long. On Paul's phone, this call shows it's not on Alec's. He deleted this call history. Pretty much all these calls that Alec makes are not on his phone, which is very suspicious. That's suspicious. 6:09, Paul calls Maggie. That is answered for 2 seconds. Around 30 seconds later, Maggie texts Paul, "You okay? Getting a little foot massage, then I'm headed home." 10 seconds later, Paul responds, "Yeah." 3 seconds later, Maggie responds, "Love you, and Blanca cooked you dinner." 6:20 p.m., Maggie gets a call from her sister Miriam, who testified last week, and she, bless her heart, she just can't imagine walking in her shoes. Maggie rejects the call and texts back 30 seconds later, "Can't talk, getting foot massage, we'll call you back." 6:23 p.m., Paul texts Maggie, "What did she make?" 19 seconds later, Maggie responds, "Country fried steak and mac and cheese." At 6:24, Alec's phone connects to the Suburban. Same time, Paul calls Nolan. That lasts for 5 minutes and 50 seconds. Same time, Alec leaves the firm. Alec gets a call 1 minute later at 6:25 from a Jay Parker. 6:27 p.m., Paul texts someone named Britt, maybe Saturday. 6:33, Paul calls someone named Robert. The duration of that call is 1 second. 6:40 p.m., Paul calls Alec, is put as Pa in his phone as the contact name, 2 minute and 29 second duration. 6:42, Alec arrives at Moselle. 1 minute later, he calls Maggie. That was a missed call. She is listed in his phone as Maggie May. 6:43, Alec calls Maggie, 1 minute and 44 duration. Now, it's confusing on this timeline because it shows missed calls in between when this call would have connected. So I'm not sure what's up with that, but it looks like at 6:43, Alec and Maggie talked for 1 minute 44. 6:52, Alec calls Terry Brandstetter. That's almost a 7-minute duration call. I think that is Maggie's dad. And that's the last data entry for Alec's phone until after 9, but it does record steps taken. So at 6:53 p.m., Paul calls John Marvin, Murdaugh, Alec's brother. That's 1 minute 42 duration. 7 p.m., Paul texts CB Rowe, "Are you coming tomorrow? Sunflowers died. We need to plow them under ASAP." 7:02 p.m., Maggie calls Alec. That's a 2-second call. So from 7:03 to 7:11, Paul takes 165 steps. And then at 7:04, he's at the main house. So clearly he's getting to the house, walks around the house for a bit, and that logs on his phone. At the same time, at 7:04, Maggie's phone connects to her car, and she plugs that phone in. A minute later, at 7:05, Maggie calls her sister. That's a 7-second call. 7:05, Alec texts Maggie. Paul said you were getting petty. Call when you done. 7:05, Maggie calls Paul. That's a 1 minute, 31 second duration call. 7:09, Maggie calls somebody named Courtney for 3 seconds. 7:09, same time, Maggie calls mom, and that's an 8 minute and 17 second duration phone call. Now, here we can kind of see Alec and Paul are taking steps in tandem. Maybe this is when they went and did the ride around on the property. So from 7:14 to 7:22, Paul takes 208 steps. Then from 7:15 to 7:21, Alec takes 200 steps. So similar times, similar steps. They're clearly hanging out together. 7:18 p.m., Maggie calls Barbara. That is a 2-second call. 7:18, Alec texts CB, call me please. 7:21, Maggie accesses Find My iPhone. I thought that was interesting. I mean, we have it, so sometimes I just see where everybody's at. We actually use Life 360, but 7:25 to 7:34, Paul takes 139 steps. Then 7:28 to 7:37, Alec takes 47. 7:31, Maggie still on the road back to Moselle, calls her sister and talks for 7 minutes and 39 seconds. 7:35 to 7:41, Paul takes 171 steps. Also at 7:37, Paul gets a Snapchat from somebody named Michelle, and it says, from her, because I have short-term memory loss. So we're picking up on the middle of a conversation there. 7:38, Paul gets a text from a girl named Megan. It says Paul. 7:39, Maggie calls Barbara. That's unanswered. Same time, 7:39, the Snapchat video thumbnail is created on Paul's phone, which means he probably took that Snapchat video. But remember, at Moselle, the cell service was super spotty. So sometimes you might record something and not be able to send it because you don't have a signal. Also, at that same time, Paul is at the residence. So maybe it just, once he recorded it and got to the house, it hit the Wi-Fi and started uploading. That's the best I can figure, because we know that Snapchat video was taken out in a field with a tree that was not doing so hot. So from 7:41 to 7:48, this is just roughly an hour before the murders, Alec takes 29 steps. 7:45 to 7:55, Paul takes 89 steps, and he kind of seems to be in the kennel or cabin area at this time. At 7:50, Maggie calls Barbara. That's 8 seconds. Same time that she makes this call, she's in Walterboro, which is where the trial's happening right now. 7:52, about less than an hour before these murders, Paul's battery is at 7%. 7:55 to 8:05, Paul takes 262 steps. The same time frame, Alec takes 270 steps. So it looks like they're together around this time. At this point, Paul's battery is down to 6%. At 7:56, Paul's phone is pinged at the caretaker house on the Moselle property. At the same time, at 7:56, that Snapchat video is sent and his battery percentage drops to 5%. 7:57, Paul receives a Snapchat from Brian Murdaugh. We need some straps on it. At 8 o'clock, Paul's iPhone location has him in the Dove field. At 8:05 to 8:09, Alec takes 54 steps. 8:05 to 8:15, Paul takes 303 steps. At 8:06 p.m., Paul's phone is pinged at the cabin location, but it's moving towards the main house. At 8:07, Paul sends the Snapchat video to several friends. And at 8:11, Maggie's phone locks. At 8:17, Maggie's phone ends the connection to her car. At the same time, Paul's battery drops to 4%. So we know at 8:17 about is when Maggie got to Moselle, because from 8:17 to just a minute later, at 8:18, she takes 38 steps. At 8:19, Paul's at the main house and connects to Wi-Fi. Receives a snap from a person named Ansley. It says he's got the magic touch, probably referring to that Snapchat video where he knocks that tree over. And he says, better than it was, ain't it? At 8:23, Paul sends a snap to someone named Marlene. It says he's hurt, and I assume he's talking about Cash the dog. At 8:24, Paul texts Megan, and it just says Megan. At 8:28, Paul gets a text from Megan. Were you avoiding me? Paul responds at the same time, when? And then at the same time, he gets a text from Miss Morgan. It says, I have not received anything back yet. Did you get the lease email? I'm assuming maybe this has to do with school or something like that. What you know, Alec buyers, you know I've been traveling weekly to cover the Alec Murdaugh murder trial, and I hate packing. And even more, I hate loading and unloading a bunch of bags when I get back to Walterboro. The Weekender bag from Base has cut down the number of bags I need to take and has all the things I need, like a laptop sleeve and even a key leash. Base was created by actress Shay Mitchell to make sleek and affordable bags, luggage, and accessories designed to help you travel effortlessly while still looking fashionable. Base has thought of everything you could ever want in a piece of luggage. 360-degree gliding wheels, a cushioned handle, built-in weight indicator, washable bags for your dirty clothes, and all the interior pockets you need to keep organized. Their luggage comes in multiple sizes and colors, and for shorter trips, the Weekender bag is super functional and even has a place to store your shoes separately. Every piece is made to look better with miles, so you don't have to worry about it in cargo or overhead. And Base has over 30,000 five-star reviews. Whether you're packing for a quick trip or looking to breeze through the security line, Base has your personal items covered. Right now, Base is offering my listeners 15% off your first purchase by visiting basetravel.com/whattheworld. Go to basetravel.com/whattheworld for 15% off your first purchase. That's Base, BEIS travel.com/whattheworld. And now it's time for a word for our sponsor of the week, Lomi by Pila. Look, I've never been able to compost before. It's always too complicated, too much work, and it's too stinky. Then I got a Lomi. Lomi allows me to turn my food scraps into dirt with the push of a button. It's a countertop electric composter that turns scraps into dirt in under 4 hours. There's no smell when it runs, and it's really quiet. Thanks to Lomi, I have way less garbage each week, down from 4 bags to 2, by the way, and I feel great knowing I'm composting and creating soil instead of waste. I've basically a limitless supply of dirt for my garden. So what can you put in Lomi? Food leftovers, fruits and vegetables, eggs and eggshells, grains, coffee grounds, yard trimmings, houseplants, and more. If you want to start making a positive environmental impact or just make cleanup after dinner that much easier, Lomi is perfect for you. Head to lomi.com/whattheworld and use the promo code WHATTHEWORLD to get your $50 off your Lomi. That's $50 off when you head to lomi.com/whattheworld and use promo code WHATTHEWORLD at checkout. Food waste is gross. Let Lomi save you a cold trip out to the garbage can. At 8:29, Paul gets a text from Megan. You didn't send me any movie recommendations. Paul responds, haha, I didn't have a good one. Will's might. At 8:30, a minute later, he gets a text back from Megan and it says, OMG. Between 8:30 and 8:33, Maggie takes 43 steps. And at 8:31, there's that family group text from John Marvin. It says, I plan to go over to visit Dad tomorrow afternoon. Is anyone else planning to go? Now, what's interesting is at 8:31, Maggie's phone unlocks and there's an orientation change to landscape. She reads a message from her sister-in-law, Lynn, but doesn't read that family text yet. The same time, 8:31, her phone locks again. At 8:32, Paul gets a call from someone named Lucille and he rejects the call. From 8:32 to 8:42, Paul takes 283 steps. Now, we know at 8:38, his location is pinged near the kennels. This is just what I think about 12 minutes before the murders start. 8:44 p.m., just minutes before, Maggie's phone screen is on and off again 12 seconds later. 8:44, this is when Paul times to FaceTime Rogan. Didn't work. So what does Paul do? Takes the now infamous kennel video, which proved Alec was down at those kennels at 8:44. Now we know that that kennel video was never sent to Rogan. At 8:45 on the report, it has Paul at incident location. At 8:47, Paul texts Megan, haha, kidding. Then a minute later, at 8:48, he texts her again, A Star is Born is the movie. So right after, Megan replies, no, I need something happy. I don't like watching sad movies. Now, from 8:48 to 8:49, Paul's phone unlocks for the last time. And then from 8:49 to 10:18, the backlight on his phone is off. Now, the same time at 8:49, Maggie's phone unlocked and she read that group family text from John Marvin. And she has an orientation change to landscape, which means that she must read her text sideways. 8 seconds later, her phone accesses an app and an Lord have mercy, y'all, my tongue is not working. 8 seconds later, her phone accesses an app and orientation change to landscape. I ain't been to the bar, y'all, I promise. 3 seconds later at 8:49, her phone locks forever and isn't unlocked until the next day at 1:10 p.m. And that's when her phone was found about 15 feet off the road. So there's 31 seconds between when Paul and Maggie's phone locks for good. 31 seconds. It's interesting, this timeline, because I really do think that by 8:49, this is going on, because Paul gets a text from Rogan at 8:49. See if you can get a good picture of it. Marianne wants to send it to a girl we know that's a vet. Tell him to sit and stay, and he shouldn't move around too much. That message is unread. Now, as much as Paul's communicating, we see that at 8:48, he texts Megan. At 8:49, he does not respond to this text that Rogan sent. At this point, he still has battery left on his phone. So I do think 8:49 is when it got real. From 8:53 to 8:55, Maggie's phone takes 59 steps. And then also there is a vertical orientation on that phone. 4 seconds later, it goes to landscape. 1 minute later, the orientation goes back to vertical. So you have some vertical changes there in the 8:55 mark. It goes vertical to landscape, then back to vertical. So at this point, it's interesting because I don't know, we have this thing that they showed. We didn't get to see it in court, but you've got this mud print that Maggie has of what Dr. Kinsey thinks is an impression of one of those ATV tires. Then we have those up and down footsteps, if you remember, that they showed right next to, I believe it was the hanger, and they determined those to be the shoes Maggie was wearing. I wonder if right after something happened to Paul, which I think maybe was finished by 8:50, 8:51 or so, if Maggie's not hiding or something, I don't know. But you got 8:53 to 8:55. She's taken 59 steps. So either somebody has her phone if she's already dead, or maybe she's hiding, because I'm thinking if she kind of backed up against this ATV, from what I could see, you could kind of spot it on the monitor for a second. It looked pretty muddy. So to me, I just kind of feel like maybe she was trying to hide or something. It's just total speculation on my part. Nobody's ever indicated that. But I think about those footprints and then the mud print on the back of her leg. And he made clear in his opinion, Dr. Kinsey said he did not think she had been run over. So she just laid up against it. But at 8:55, her phone took a snapshot of the Facebook app running in the background. So this is initiated when you change apps or swipe up from the home screen. And 8:55 to 9:03 p.m., her backlight is off. 9:02 to 9:06, Alec walks 283 steps. And the prosecution says he was a busy guy right then. Now, this is right in the time where I think the murders have happened and right when he's leaving to go to his mom's. So 9:03 to 9:04, her backlight is on her phone, Maggie. 9:04, Alec calls Maggie. That's an 18-second call, but I don't believe it was answered. I think she was dead at this point. Then 8:04, her backlight goes off. 9:05, Alec calls his dad. That's an 18-second duration. call. 9:05, Maggie's backlight is on again, and her orientation at 9:06 changes to portrait. Now, we've heard from other people that have testified that typically happens when it's trying to grab that Face ID. At 9:06, the same time, Alec calls Maggie as that orientation change happens. At 9:06:14, he calls her the first time. Then 9:06:15, he calls again. That one's 3 seconds. Obviously, we know she didn't answer. Then at 9:06:20, same time, just 5 seconds after that second call, her orientation changes to landscape. 9:06:52, he calls her again. That's a 7-second duration. Then 1 second after he tries to call her, his phone connects to the Suburban and her backlight goes back off. 9:07, he leaves Moselle for his mom's house. So the state at this point is really trying to put in here that there are reasons that he went to his mom's that night. Number one, to establish an alibi. Number two, to stash the weapons. That's what they think that trip was for. So he goes 37 miles an hour coming out of Moselle, getting onto Moselle Road. Now at 9:08, he passes by the exact location where her phone is found the next day. After he passes that location, his car accelerates, but it also doesn't slow down where they found the phone. I think this was pretty powerful for the jury because you have that aha moment. Also, this witness had visuals, which greatly helps this jury who does not get to take notes. You know, I take notes, I get confused. Bless their hearts. They're going to have to pour through all kinds of stuff back in that deliberation room when it comes time. They have no notes, but I get it too. Why they don't, because it's like the secret that you pass down the line. One person might hear one thing, another might hear another, and then you got arguing in the deliberation room of who heard right. Give them all the evidence and let them decide there. So I think it does kind of make sense, but still, I don't want a notebook if I was on that jury. So after that phone is thrown out, he accelerates from 37 and reaches 42 miles an hour near where her phone was found. Then over the next minute and a half, he accelerates up to 54 miles an hour. At 9:08, this is 22 seconds after passing where her phone was found, he texts Maggie, going to check on mom, be right back. Of course, we know that was unread. At 9:08, her phone lights up with that text notification from Alec. At 9:10, Rogan calls Paul. That goes unanswered. So same time, 9:10, Alec calls Buster. That's a 1-minute duration phone call. 9:12, he calls Chris Wilson. That's a 42-second duration call. At 9:16 p.m., the car reaches a speed of 70 miles an hour. 2 minutes later at 9:18, he calls his brother, John Marvin. They talk for 1 minute and 46 seconds. So at 9:20, Chris Wilson calls Alec. That is a 2-minute and 11-second call. 9:21, while Alec's on the phone with Chris Wilson, CB Rowe calls. Then a minute later, he turns into his mom's driveway. It took 15 minutes to get there, max speed 74 miles an hour. So the agent says that 36 seconds after turning into the drive, Alec went into the grass closer to the wood line when he pulls in, which is interesting, but that wasn't a whole lot that they dived into later. I think the thing with cell phone pings is that you throw that out there to get the gears turning, but also with cell phone data, a lot of times there's a bubble and you could be within so many yards of the actual location. Sometimes it can be a big bubble. We know in Lori Vallow, Chad Daybell, the way they found the kids' bodies was by using Alex Cox's Google location history, and it was down to meters. It led them to the kids' bodies. So this is powerful stuff. People don't understand. I don't know why anybody thinks they're going to get away with murder in 2023. Come on, y'all. You're getting filmed everywhere you go. Our phones record everything we do. I mean, really, it's scary what this little thing right here can do and what it holds. But at the same time, in a situation like this, is so beneficial. I have no problem with my phone recording what I do. It's probably, it would be boring for people to read, like investigators to read my phone stuff. I don't care about it really, but I know some people, have problems. You talk about wanting to go to Vegas, and then the next day you're getting ads for Vegas all over your social media. Yeah, they listening. So from 9:22 to 9:32, Alec takes 195 steps. But at 9:20, we see that he gets there at 9:22, turns into his mom's driveway. 9:24, he calls the house phone at his mom's house. That is a 22-second duration. If you remember, Miss Shelley testified that he was at the front door, said, "Come let me in." It took her 5 minutes to get there. At 9:29 p.m., Rogan calls Paul. We know that's unanswered. 9:31 p.m., Maggie's backlight goes off and then back on. 9:33, her backlight is on for 13 seconds. Then 13 seconds later, it's back off until 9:34 when Rogan sends Maggie a text, "Tell Paul to call me." 9:35 to 9:45, Alec takes 60 steps. 9:42, Rogan calls Paul at the same time. Alec's phone connects to the Suburban, so we know at 9:42 he's getting in his car to go back to Moselle. So 9:43, 20 minutes after the arrival, which verifies Miss Shelley's testimony and not him telling her 30 to 40 minutes if anybody asked, he leaves his mom's for Moselle. So 20 minutes after arriving. 9:45, Alec calls Maggie. Her backlight comes on. 1 minute later, 9:46, nearly an hour after the murders, he calls Paul. 9:47, Alec texts Maggie. He says, "Call me babe." At 9:51, he's clocked going 74 miles an hour. 9:52 p.m., he texts Chris Wilson, "Call me if you up." Chris calls Alec. That lasted only for 42 seconds. At 9:53, Chris Wilson calls Alec. They talk for 2 minutes and 3 seconds. 9:57, an hour probably after the murders. 9:57 p.m., Rogan calls Paul. Unanswered. A minute later, Rogan texts Paul and says, "Yo, 10 o'clock on the dot, Alec arrives at Moselle. Max speed for that trip back, 80 miles an hour. 30 seconds later, he's halfway down the main drive to the residence." Now, the witness talks about the roads between Alameda and Moselle. Now, look, I'm going to tell you right now, y'all have not seen some jacked up roads till you've driven on some backwoods in South Carolina. There's potholes everywhere. There's like deer all over the side of the road. You can see their eyes glaring in your headlights. And I'm going to tell you, they go towards the light. I about hit one last week coming into Walterboro. He looked like Rudolph going over the hood of my Jeep. It's like a movie. It's like you just see him lined up watching the cars. So the posted speed limit is 55. So the police said when they are going full blast on Moselle Road, they would run calls with lights and sirens. They would not go 80 miles an hour or anywhere near it just for safety reasons because of the potholes and the deer. I'm telling you, if a deer can total your car, it can kill you. Those things do terrible damage. So when at 10:03, so 3 minutes after he gets back, he calls Maggie. 10:04, the phone connects to the Suburban, so he's on his way back down to the kennels. At 10:04, Rogan calls Buster. So you can see at this point, he's already tried Paul, he's tried Maggie, now he's getting Buster. At 10:05:06, Alec leaves the residence for the kennels. At 10:05:49, he's going 28.6 miles an hour. And then at 10:05:57, he arrives at the kennels. So 51 seconds to get to the kennels. So between 10 o'clock and 10:06, from the time he arrived to when he makes the 911 call, he takes 231 steps. 10:06, we have the 911 call. So from the arrival time at the kennels, which is 10:05:57 and 10:06, 20, I don't have the seconds here. It ends up being 20 seconds that he arrives at the kennels, sees the bodies, supposedly checks them for a pulse, and calls 911. So 10:06 to 10:16, He takes 594 steps. And then at 10:08, Rogan calls Paul. 10:11 p.m., Alec goes to the house to get the shotgun. He's still on the phone with 911 at this point. A minute later, he's at the main house at 10:12, max speed of 35 miles an hour from the kennels to the main house. 2 minutes later at 10:14, he's going back to the kennels. 10:17, the 911 call ends. The duration of that was about 11 minutes. 2 minutes later, Alec calls his brother Randy. That call is unanswered. So at the same time, 10:19, he calls John Marvin. That is a 40-second duration call. 10:20, Paul's display is on, and then Alec calls Rogan, the guy who's been trying to get in touch with Paul, who has Cash the dog. So at 10:21, Alec calls Christy Murdaugh, and that call is 53 seconds. At 10:22, Alec gets the group text from Michael Gunn, the real Forge guy, by the way. The text says, "She brought the heat from Miami, boys," is a picture of a woman in a bikini. Alec reads that text 16 minutes later at 10:35 p.m. But at 10:24 p.m., he calls Rogan again. Then he texts Rogan, "Call me." I believe Rogan testified that he was asleep, so he didn't get any of these calls or texts about this. So at 10:25, Alec tries to FaceTime Rogan. Now, what's interesting is this is the first contact that shows up on Alec's extraction from this time frame for that day. So I don't know if that's an oversight or what, but then at 10:25, the first deputy arrives to Moselle. From 10:28 to 10:37, Alec takes 320 steps. At 10:29, he calls Randy, his brother, for 42 seconds. A minute later, at 10:30, he tries to FaceTime Rogan. So they finish up the witness showing these two pictures of Maggie, one with her sister and the other one with Buster and Paul. And just, man, I tell you, watching Dr. Kinsey on the TV and being able to see how he put all that into a visual of her position and how that shooter was and the way he held that dowel, it made it so real, and it made it like a gut punch to imagine Maggie kind of down, holding her hand up to keep herself upright. And then you got that shot that just ricochets. And then it goes from the breast up through the jaw into the head. And then he comes around like facing and pulls that dowel back and says that's directly down into her cranium. It's just horrific to hear this stuff. So on cross, Barber is up and points out that going to his mom's, it took 15 to 16 minutes, and back it took 18 minutes, and that's with more speed. The witness says that the test drive was 17 minutes for them, so the defense points out that's right there in the middle. So the defense asks if when passing the location where Maggie's phone was found, was it a gentle acceleration? And he said, yes, it was. The defense points out he also did not slow down when he passed that spot. So when asked if coming from the house to the kennels, would his car have illuminated Maggie or Paul's body, the witness did not want to give it up, y'all. It was one of those back and forth. And I get why they do it, and I get why the defense pressures, because you got to get them to give this up. Because 20 seconds from the time he gets to the kennels and finds the body, that's a gap that you got as a juror, you got to answer that for me. And they kind of did a pretty clever little thing here in a second, but the witness is like, I wasn't there. I don't know. They're back and forth for a hot minute. Finally, he admits at least Maggie's body would have been seen in the headlights as Alec pulled into those kennels. Remember, she was kind of out in the field, like 30 feet away. Paul was actually, he was shot. If you remember, Dr. Kinsey said, Dr. Kinsey said when Paul shot, he's kind of up against that door or close to it. And he thinks that the shoulder and the head were outside that door, but the feet were still inside that feed room. And then when that fatal shot comes and it goes shoulder to the neck to the head, He immediately falls where he's at. We know he falls forward, arms are tucked. He had some abrasions on his face from it. So the defense asked if he parked near Maggie's body. And they go back and forth. And the witness just says he was close, just before where her body was found. The defense asks if 20 seconds is long enough to see if he sees her body before getting out, and then he checks Paul and calling 911. He also reminds the witness that Alec dialed wrong when he tried to call 911 the first time. And the witness says, I'm here to testify on the data, not a hypothetical. I think you're asking the wrong person. And he says, fair enough. So what does the defense do? They asked this guy to take his phone and set the timer for 20 seconds. And I'm going to tell you, it was effective. It seemed like an eternity. And everybody that I talked to in that courtroom agreed you never realize how long 20 seconds is until you're sitting in silence waiting on it. They have to kind of combat that time discrepancy because it's a big deal. That is a big, big deal. 20 seconds to go 30 yards possibly, or go to Paul and then check for a pulse, dial 911. So there's back and forth about orientation changes on Maggie's phone. And the witness says, look, I'm not a phone expert. I literally just get all this stuff and put it into a timeline. So SLED test drove the drive from the house to the kennels. It took them 1 minute and 15. The defense points out all Alec would have needed to done to cover up the murders in a short amount of time, like clean up, ditch the clothes, probably take a shower, whatever. So they discussed the calls Alec made after finding the bodies. He called Rogan, he called John Marvin, and the witness said he found it really odd that he called Rogan. And the defense says Paul's phone had missed calls, missed FaceTimes, missed texts from Rogan, and being on the phone, you know, the witness says it's just odd that you're on the phone the whole time. You're standing over your wife and son's body. He said, I would be in a state of shock. Then apparently Alec had Googled a restaurant just minutes after finding the bodies. It was a restaurant in Edisto Beach. And the defense says, could it have been a fat finger moment? He's holding his phone. Could he have been in shock? But the defense points out that after 9 p.m., Alec's phone is recorded taking steps, but Maggie's is not. He asked if there's proof both phones were ever taking steps together. And the witness said he would say the phones were together at 9:06. And there's an orientation change to her phone 2 seconds before Alec calls her phone. So they talk about why Paul's phone isn't lighting up with notifications with missed calls and texts. And the witness says he assumed it was automatic to preserve the battery. I don't know that that's, you can have battery saver mode on. So maybe if he had that on, that would happen. But if I have a low battery and I don't tell it no notifications, then it still notifies. But on redirect, the prosecution points out that the backlight on Maggie's phone turned off at 9:07, which is the time he drove past the spot it was found the next day. So that's the end of the state's case and the witness. I thought it was a really strong way. I mean, you poke holes in that timeline, you make discrepancies known, like the amount of time he was at his mom's house, the amount of time from when he pulled up at the kennels to the 911 call, all that stuff. Driving past where the phone was found, I think that was pretty powerful. The jury was very engaged. They were hanging on every single time thrown out there. So it's very standard. After the state rest, the defense asked for a directed verdict to toss out the case. Judge Newman said there's evidence to support a guilty verdict if that's what the jury decides, denies that motion. So the first defense witness, very colorful dude, in a very subtle way, Coroner Richard Harvey. Now, in South Carolina, our coroners are elected officials. You do not have to have a medical degree to be a coroner in South Carolina. I think that needs to change, not pertaining to this case particularly. I think in general, if you're going to determine deaths, you need to have medical degrees. I just don't think that that's something you crack a book and then you're sent out to homicides or something that looks like a natural death but could be a poisoning and stuff like that. Just my 2 cents. I think every coroner needs to be a medical doctor. He notes, though, that he was the first medically trained coroner in South Carolina. I'm assuming it was on the job training because he said he had no medical degree. He had a deputy who was on duty that night. They were made aware of the scene at 10:30, but the deputy had to work a second job, part-time worker for the coroner, and that couldn't stay. So the coroner, this man, Mr. Harvey, arrived on scene at 11:04. So he took photos before SLED arrived and did their crime scene investigation. So he listed the time of death as 9 o'clock, but said it could have been any time between 8:30 and 10 o'clock. So he was told SLED could be a while. So he wanted to check the bodies, which at that point were still covered in a sheet. Okay, y'all, this is where it gets interesting. Okay, I've never heard of this, but here we go. He says he placed his hands in Maggie and Paul's armpit area to check their body temperatures. He said he normally carries a thermometer, but he didn't that night. So on cross, he says thermometers aren't necessarily more accurate. He said that he was talking about using a rectal thermometer. He said there were too many people there or something to that effect. But he said you'd lose 4.5 degrees every hour after you die. And the weather or just the ambient temperature of where you died at or where your body is can affect your body temperature and how quickly or how slowly it cools off. When asked if the rain could have changed their body temperatures, he points out that Paul was covered where he was found, and both Maggie and Paul's hair on their head was dry. So on redirect, nobody asked him for the time of death. The last witness, Shaylene Tindal, the public information officer from the Colleton County Sheriff's Office, she did the press release with SLED that next morning saying there's no danger to the public. That was a joint statement between Colleton County and SLED. Their first release was kind of a rough draft that was in response to some local-ish, one was actually here in Greenville, news stations that were asking for a statement. Later that day, they put it out on official letterhead and released it, but they kept out the no danger to the public included, and that was SLED's idea. Now, that was one thing that Harpootlian had mentioned is, did you say to the public, we took that out, there could be a danger to the community, and she says no. She mentions PIOs do not know the details of the investigations for these press releases, that they just release what information they're given. There was some back and forth, a couple of lighthearted moments with her. Alec looked pretty smitten there at the end. He kind of got red-faced and had like the schoolboy grin on his face, but she was on and off really quickly. That ended the long day and the start of a long weekend. Thank goodness. So what's next? Monday, I'm going to put something out, and I think it's probably not going to be Murdaugh related. I'm going to try to catch up on some other cases I've been covering. However, lunch hour, I'm not sure the exact time. I'll send you the link on social media. I will be doing the live Q&A just as we do every day when I'm live at the trial talking about Murdaugh. So I'm looking forward to that. Please join us on Law and Crimes YouTube or the network. In the meantime, if you're on YouTube and don't subscribe, please hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, because it helps push this podcast out to people who might be searching for the same thing. It helps me out and it helps me to grow. So I appreciate you. Hit the little bell for notifications. I'm doing some shorts a little more regularly now being down there. So that way you'll be notified anytime I do a short. And yeah, so I'm looking forward to being done as of now, 6:45 p.m. And I'll see you guys on Monday. Big thank you to my Patreon perk subscribers. I do have a Patreon. I've had people ask. It is nothing exclusive. I don't pay for content. We get some live episodes in, although it's been very hard because while I love the hotel I'm staying at, the Wi-Fi is not the best. And I do have a jetpack thanks to a very, very sweet listener, but it doesn't really connect well. I think they're still in the walls. So it takes me forever to get these uploaded. So my Patreon perks people, we're going to do a live tomorrow night, Sunday. I'll post in there. We're going to do about an hour just where we chit chat about the case. And you guys ask whatever you want. So anyways, people have asked at the courthouse, do you have merchandise? I do have a merch store. It's always in the link in the description, as is any photo that I show is in a link in the description. I'm saying this every episode because I'm getting some new listeners. So I want everybody on board. All right, y'all. Hope you have a great weekend, great long weekend. Hopefully you guys are off on Monday. Those of you who aren't, thanks for holding down the fort while some of us just stay a little lazy. All right, we'll see you soon.